Welcome back to another episode of Bridges, the series where we are building a bridge between marketing and finance inside of your organization. And in today's episode 11, we are talking about marketing for this market. And we're going to analyze how the macro environment that we currently exist in should inform the way that we marketers think about our job. The reality is that the availability of capital has completely transformed our industry and has forced businesses into a completely different model of growing their business. And we're going to dive in. We only have 2 episodes left, y'all, in this series. So bookmark it, watch the whole thing. And as always, thank you to Wayflyer and Final Loop for making it happen. While there is a scarcity in the availability of capital, Wayflyer is one of the people that can make you happen. And there's no better place to track every dollar that you owe in debt, everything that's showing up in your P&L in real time than inside of Final Loop. They are critical components that are helping to tell this story to the market, helping to spread the gospel of marketing and finance alongside me. So we are excited and grateful for their participation. Episode 11, Market for This Market. Let's dive in. All right. If you follow me at all on the socials, you may have seen that this past week we did a big podcast episode featuring Tomer Chagrin from Yotpo and Sean Frank from Ridge talking about SaaS pricing. And this conversation was about how critical it is for software providers today to be able to create value for their customers and to be transparent with and ethical with their pricing. And this is a great setup for my partners at Final Loop. And if you go check out the pricing on their site, there are a lot of things I love about this. One is, and brands, I think, have a deep appreciation for this, you can see very clearly what the price is going to be for the utilization of this service relative to your projected revenue. And what you'll see is that, look, there are very clear tiers at which that pricing increases. And the thing that they do is they help you understand a critical component of making a purchase decision for their business. And that's that what costs they are going to be able to replace in your business. Software has 2 obligations. One is value creation. Either they have to be able to generate increased revenue or cost savings. And Final Loop, I think, has the potential to do both. But the shortest path to value inside of your organization is to be able to take an existing cost and immediately replace it in a way that allows you to save money, get better detailed information, more accurate, faster access to your financial data so that you can make better decisions in real time. So Final Loop, thank you for your transparency in pricing. Go check them out. You're going to love it. My first life was spent as a professional athlete in the New York Yankee system. And when I was drafted out of college, I had an opportunity to go play for one of the Yankees minor league teams, the Charleston River Dogs. And when I went to play for that team, I was coming off of what had been the most successful year of my athletic career in college, playing a sport that was 100% about winning and team, and coming off feeling very good about myself, despite the fact that I was a 19th round draft pick, which is pretty low, and only paid $20,000 to go sign and play. If you know anything about professional sports, it's not a very big number. But I was given a rude awakening when I came to play for the River Dogs, and that involved this man right here next to me. At the time, an 18-year-old by the name of Carmen Angelini. And every day when I would show up to the field, I would check the lineup card and see that Carmen was playing ahead of me. Now, this isn't to diminish Carmen. He was a fantastic player, but he wasn't as talented as me. He was only 18 years old. I was almost 23. And I was, by most measures, at that moment in time, a better player. Yet he played in front of me every single day for many days throughout the summer. And I was infuriated. I became bitter. I withdrew. I felt like I was being oppressed in some way by this organization and not given an opportunity to succeed. But I was missing one very important point about professional sports. You see, Carmen was drafted in the 2nd round and he was paid $1 million by the New York Yankees. They had invested a lot of money into him. And they believed that he provided a better chance for a large return on investment on their capital, much more so than I did at almost 23 years old and paid only $19,000 out of college. So he was given repeated opportunities to succeed in the sport. And what I didn't understand in that moment was that the rules of the game I had come to love had completely changed and I wasn't ready. This was no longer a team sport about winning. In the minor leagues, they really don't care about team success at all. This was a competition amongst individuals for a chance to opportunity to move up the ladder and help the organization make money. I was now a part of a business and I didn't realize it. And as you read this, I want you to understand that the same thing is happening to you, marketer, in the state of e-commerce. The rules of our game have changed completely over the last few years as well. This has gone from a game about revenue generation to one about profit to now more than ever, the game is actually about cash. And I want to today take some time to understand how we can think about and understand the market in which we exist and how it changes the pursuit of our skills and understanding of our work. If we look back at the heroes of the last era, the people you probably saw on podcasts and watched on stages, it was many of the founders and marketers inside of brands like these ones, Allbirds and Stitch Fix and Solo Brands and Warby Parker and Figs and Peloton. The reality is all of these brands have, over the last 3 years, become one of the worst performing asset classes in the history of finance. And I don't say that lightly, but if you look across the board, Allbirds down 97% off all-time highs, Stitch Fix 90%, Solo Brands 92%, Warby Parker 80%, Figs 84%, Peloton 90%. These are horrible performing assets. And it's because they missed or misunderstood the game that was being played because the market shifted very dramatically underneath their feet and they were not able to adapt in time to produce value. And maybe they weren't built for that to begin with. And what happens when the publicly traded companies fail to perform, it creates a series of downstream pressures onto our industry. The first thing that we see is a fleeing of all the venture dollars that ultimately fund businesses in the hopes and aspirations of one day receiving a return through liquidity of acquisition or going public. And so we saw a 97% decline in venture dollars coming into consumer product e-com. You can see the high in 2021 at almost $5 billion in venture financing coming into consumer products and e-commerce. In 2023, that was down to barely $200 million. And the money just flows down from there. And in addition to that problem, there was also a significant increase in the cost of debt. Here's a graph of an SBA 505 loan rates, which SBA loans fund a lot of the e-commerce activity in our industry for startups as well as e-commerce acquisitions. And you can see in that same time period, August of 2020, they hit a significant low at a 2.27% interest rate on a 25-year SBA loan. Whereas sitting here today, they're up to almost 6.7%. And this is true for basically every kind of debt that you can think of. You can think about the prime corporate rate. So think of this as the average of the corporate debt that's issued across the largest companies in the world is up significantly from a year ago to its present state, which is the highest it's been in many, many years. You can see a constant increase, not just from 2020 and 2021, but even year over year for prime, for SOFR, for the Fed fund rate, and for mortgages. The cost of capital has continued to rise and the availability of venture financing has disappeared. In fact, if we look at the period against 2021, we see that venture capital decreased 97% and the cost of debt is up over almost 200%. And functionally, what that means for us as marketers is that there is no cash available. So businesses fundamentally do not have access to capital, or the capital that they have access to is significantly more expensive than it was in the past, and the bar to accessing it is higher than it was before. And when the availability of capital changes, brands are forced to self-fund their growth. This is the fundamental transformation in the game that we are all playing, and it's critical to understand as marketers what the implications are on the businesses that we operate in. And the hardest part about this is that e-commerce at its start and in the core of it is almost always cash destructive because of the inventory cycle that it operates on. There's a very simple illustration of this. Let's use a pretend company. Let's call it the Charleston Chew Toys. My wife and I are starting a dog business. We have a beautiful new puppy. Her name is Jack, and we will start this business. Let's imagine that we have an initial cash investment of $10,000 that we've saved up to deploy. We find a manufacturer that's willing to produce these chew toys for us at $50 a unit. We're able to make an initial purchase order of 200 units. We decide we're going to sell them at market at $100, which gives us $20,000 retail value of our product, right? Opportunity to take $10,000 and turn it into 20. But when we think about the obligation to do that, we have to consider the cost of acquisition that we're likely going to have to apply against that revenue realization. And if we were to look at Statless's average benchmark for AMER, which is new customer revenue over ad spend, we see that the median result is about a 2.35 AMER, which is again, new customer revenue over ad spend. That translates to about a 41% CAC. And again, I'm being generous here to assume that my brand new startup would perform the same way as a business, as the average median result across all of the CTC customers, which include a lot of really mature, established companies. So if we were to break that down into the unit economics, we would see that gives us an average order value of $100, a cost of goods of $50. We add in our shipping and fulfillment, that's going to be $10. Our payment processor is going to take another $2. And then our friend Uncle Zuck is going to get about $41. The net result is we're likely producing negative contribution on first order. And this is the case for many businesses. We've talked a lot about the pursuit of first order profitability, but the reality is early on, it's a very hard thing to create as you're looking to create leverage against your initial PO and the efficiency of your acquisition. So if we go back and we look at our $20,000, we've given $10,000 away to the COGS, $2,000 to shipping, $400 a payment processor, $8,200 to Zuck, and we've got negative $600 is the net contribution margin result. Well, very simply, we see that all that means is that the $9,400 that we're left with in our bank account is less than the initial investment we started with. And somewhere along the way, we have to go purchase product, right? So this ability to generate increasing cash is really stunted by the process of buying inventory, because I'm not even considering the fact that I likely had to purchase more product before I was able to sell through all of the rest. This is why so much of this conversation that we've had in the Bridges series relates to the ability to manage things like supplier terms, etc. But the point is just to illustrate that e-commerce is primarily cash destructive, and when financing is not available, that becomes a big problem. Because it works when I have access to capital. If I have debt or venture dollars to fund the initial acquisition, what I begin to create leverage against is I can grow my existing customer base. I can make larger POs to reduce the initial cost of capital. I can negotiate leverage with suppliers. I can create the mechanisms that generate the ability to produce profit. But in the beginning, that is incredibly difficult. And the end result right now is that we see a landscape that is littered by brands going bankrupt. From Outdoor Voices to Thrasio to Smile Direct Club to Morph, there's just these stories seem to be popping up every single day about brands that are unable to continue to produce cash and don't have any more access to capital. Now, of course, all along this way, I've been sharing with you a really important relationship, and that's with Wayflyer, which is still lending in our space. There have been some stories lately of some of these lenders themselves that are in trouble, but Wayflyer remains strong. And one of the reasons I made the choice to decide to partner with them, despite having issues sometimes with the way that revenue-based financing is presented, is because the reality is the banks are not lending money into this space. Venture dollars are not flowing into this space anymore. And sometimes the only available capital that doesn't require personal guarantees is the best available capital. And so in some ways, the best option that exists, as long as you're transparent and clear on the implications and rates at which you're going, can help e-commerce brands continue to succeed in the space and time that we're at. So if you're in one of those moments where you need access to capital and you want to do it at the lowest risk possible, and you have a healthy business that is actually producing positive unit economics, and you can handle some short-term margin hit on the revenue basis, it's worth checking out our friends at Wayflyer. So as this happens, one of the things that becomes really important is that we must bring a new measure to the forefront of focus in the business. I've talked a lot about first order profit. We've talked about EBITDA. We've talked about improving your balance sheet. But every business right now, I believe, should begin to consider the idea of cash flow efficiency. And think of this as the rate at which you're able to simply produce net cash dollars in your bank account off of the revenue and sales that you generate. So a lot of times this business gets focused on operating margin or EBITDA. And that is certainly an important metric. And marketers, we can get stuck there on the P&L. There are so many ways in which we must consider the implications of driving all the way through to the ability to produce cash flow efficiency. And at the end of the day, this goes back to, if we use that illustration of the Charleston Chews, we can see that the job of this business is to take money, to purchase product, to sell it for the sake of producing more money. And at its simplest level, e-commerce is that game. It is a bet with our money to go and buy in product for the sake of producing sales, for the sake of increased capital. If we can't do that, if we can't run that cycle in a way that grows the bank account, then our business is inefficient. That may show up in the marketing efforts, that may be in the operating expenses, that may have something to do with the terms that exist in the cycle itself. But regardless, this simple ability to look at this formula which is just net sales divided by free cash flow, each month to say what percentage of our sales shows up back in our bank account. How much are we able to grow? And I can tell you, even as a service business, if you're watching this as an agency, this is a transformative lens to begin to view your business, is the ability to produce, acquire, whether that's an employee in the case of a human service businesses or a unit of production in the case of e-commerce, and to be able to turn that with your cash into a unit that you can turn into sales that can turn into more cash is ultimately the state of the business. And what you'll see is that as we begin to look at that metric, we begin to see a new set of heroes emerge from the landscape. These brands that are able to produce free cash flow at an incredible level. Gold standard in this space is Hermes and LVMH. These are giant luxury businesses that produce massive amounts of free cash flow relative to their net sales. And these net sales numbers are in the billions of dollars. One surprising one that I think is an interesting business to explore in this moment, that despite top line revenue growth, still has produced always incredible capital efficiency, is Olaplex. Similarly, you see this for Lululemon and Elf. These businesses are illustrating the ability to go out and run the cycle of cash to product to sales back to cash in a way that generates efficiency and growth. And if you want to think about ways that you can go learn how to do this, I would encourage you to go back and watch episode 5, where we talk about paper profits to liquidity. We talk about specific tactics that you, the marketer, can go after to try and understand how you can support this outcome. And each of those actions are things that you can walk away with today to go try and improve the cycle. But for now, the important thing is to level set the context in which we live, to understand how to market and meet the moment, and to understand that this isn't forever. But over the last 4 years, we have all been given a lesson in understanding how our efforts relate to the macro environment in which we exist, where value gets created and assigned, where the market and investment dollars flow relative to the demand of the market, and how we as marketers then think about our actions in that context. And so when we think about this bridge, this relationship between marketing and finance, we must consider not just what happens in our individual business and to understand uniquely how we make money inside of the individual brand that you're in, but also what the market's demand is and why the availability of capital, the cost of that capital, and the interest from external equity investment play a major role in thinking about what we must produce, and to understand how unique e-commerce is in its challenge to be capital efficient, to go out and take cash, turn it into product, to sales, back to cash. So go forward with this new understanding, this enriched understanding of the context in which you exist, and help your business improve its free cash flow efficiency. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to go and follow Ben Trigo. I think I'm saying your last name right, Ben, but a lot of what I got today and some of this information came directly from a tweet that he put out. He produces amazing content. He and I have traded DMs before about trying to potentially add some of his work to the D2C index. He constantly aggregates the D2C landscape of public companies and does analysis about them. Go follow Ben. He was part of the inspiration, and some of the information today came from his tweet. He's a great follow on Twitter, and he is committed to the Bridge's life, helping bridge marketing and finance. Go follow Ben.